Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I am the Diggity Doodah Doc, aka the Slipper, the left slipper, marching down the wicket to blast a six. We are here to talk about the Blackcaps and their Cricket World Cup campaign, which starts against Sri Lanka in the next 24 to 48 hours, roughly around that time span. And I'm here with the wild card to talk through all things Kiwi cricket regarding the Blackcaps. This is part of our Niche Case World Cup extravaganza. I actually have used extravaganza twice today, one in jest in talking about the Blackcaps warm-up games, and then one in very serious terms talking about how the Niche Case is going to be covering the Cricket World Cup. And before we get to a little talking topic with the wildcard, if you're listening to this and you want to support the Niche Case, jump on Patreon. We are on Patreon. Early days of Patreon, so get in from the early days and be a Niche Case fan, a Niche Case homie, a Niche Case family member, or just review, subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff that supports the Niche Case. And if you're creative and you have an imagination, any other ways are welcome as well. This is where I welcome a big old haere mai to the wildcard. And wildcard, how the fuck are you? And the Breakers, New Zealand, Auckland, whatever they're called, Breakers, have made an interesting new signing in snapping up RJ Barrett, who won't be going to the college in America. He's one of the best prospects, high school prospects, and he is shunning college basketball to come down to play for the New Zealand Breakers. Speak, wildcard.
Mate, you just did the same mistake I did this morning, calling him RJ Barrett instead of RJ Hampton, because I went on the thing looking up RJ this morning when I got up, looking up RJ Barrett, and Twitter search is giving me all those suggestions of what other people are looking up, and it's like RJ Barrett, Lakers, RJ Barrett next, and I'm like, what have we got ourselves into here? But then I realized that it was the wrong dude. Whatever, apparently RJ is a popular name in America, I don't know, but yeah, this dude is a top, like a 5-star prospect. So we've seen this thing in the past where Terence Ferguson came and played for, I think, Adelaide, spent a year there and then got drafted by the Thunder. And last year, because of that, the NBL introduced this Next Stars program to try get guys who aren't going to go to college to play a year of professional instead before getting drafted. So they had this dude, Brian Bowen, who's played for Sydney last year. He's in the mix for the upcoming draft. And now the Breakers have got in on this with a dude who could, in 2020, like, the way things are going, he could very well be a lottery pick. So easily the highest profile guy to have done this. And obviously it's not just Australia, like Emmanuel Mudiay played in China, I think, a couple years ago. Normally with these guys, you see there's like an academic reason, like it was with Mudiay, who didn't go to college, or there's a Ferguson seemed to be some weird admin thing where he had a couple different schools he was sort of pledged to and didn't end up signing with any of them. I'm not sure what was going on there, but this dude, RJ Hampton, academically, no dramas there. He could get into any school in the country. He had offers from like Duke, Kansas, Texas Tech, all these big dogs, and decided for whatever reason he just doesn't care about the farce that is the NCAA and would rather spend a year as a pro working on his game that way. So fair play to him. The fact that he's ended up with the Breakers, I think, probably has a bit to do with the ownership playing their hype games, using their connections, those kind of things. So yeah, sweet as. It's gonna be a fun year. I don't know how much an 18-year-old, even like unless he's LeBron James, I'm not sure how much they change like the trajectory of a team. But if you put some good pieces around him, he'll certainly do a few things, and it'll be exciting to see little old Aotearoa get a little piece of their massive sort of hype and business that is college basketball leading into the draft. So yeah, that's gonna be a weird one. I think we've sort of pulled back the curtain on this whole scene now, and yeah, it's definitely going to be a contrast to cultures. New Zealand basketball, Australian basketball crossed with everything that is the massive business of previewing the end and predicting and, trying to figure out the NBA draft. But yeah, no, that's what we're in for now.
Yeah, I have no idea why I said RJ Barrett, other than...
Well, same reason as me, just because it's a name that's floating around.
Yeah, I think it's just...
I made the exact same mistake this morning, so...
I think it's just a really ridiculous situation. And anytime you have ridiculous situations, it's always fun just to go through it. And, it's going to be an interesting gauge for the quality of players in Australia and New Zealand. Like, how do they match up against not a world-class basketball player, but a top high school prospect? And then you've got this kind of clash of cultures between the American maybe bullshit and how we like to operate here in Aotearoa in Australia, especially with the way basketball stands in the American market and worldwide market as one of the biggest. The NBA is one of the biggest sporting competitions. Basketball is one of the biggest sports in the world. So it's just, as you said, how the little pieces connect, how he performs, how other guys perform around him. All that stuff just makes for a fascinating situation. And we are approaching a slightly fascinating situation as the Blackcaps prepare for their World Cup campaign. We just had the Blackcaps lose to the West Indies. West Indies smacked a big old 421. And the Blackcaps responded with 330 all-outs. All the Blackcaps bowlers got spanked, except for Trent Boult. Trent Boult took 4 wickets in either game. One game against India, he took 4 wickets at 5.21 runs and over. And then against the West Indies, he took 4 wickets and was the only bowler to concede less than 7.5 runs and over. He conceded 5.35 runs per over. So great 2 warm-up games for Trent Boult. And the other key performer from those 2 games has been Kane Williamson, who he hit a score of 67 against India and then a score of 85 against West Indies. The 85 came at a strike rate of 132, so nice little strike rate whackathon net session for Kane Williamson. You could say that Tom Blundell, another big winner, hitting a century. But just how I interpret that, Tom Blundell could basically just... There were no shackles to that New Zealand innings, especially when you look at where they were. 3 wickets down for 33 runs in the first 10 overs. From that point, warm-up game, you got nothing to lose. Just go out and have a fucking whack. So I can't read too much into that. But Tom Blundell did show that he can access the boundary in ODI cricket. But it's not an ODI, it's a warm-up game, and everyone's taking the piss. So, wildcard. How are you feeling right now? Days away from the start of the World Cup. Based on what you've... try to steer clear of specifics at the moment. Just what are you feeling? How are the Blackcaps going to perform strongly? Do you have a good feeling, bad feeling? How have these warm-up games influenced how you're feeling about the Blackcaps as we approach this opening game of their World Cup?
My big old wide perspective lens looking on the Cappies at this stage. I don't think that the warm-up games have influenced me at all. I think in a way, I watched both first innings up to a point where I could see the direction the game was going and then fell asleep. So the India game I watched until they were about seven or 8 wickets down. I think they had a little partnership towards the end that got them through towards something at least, and that was kind of frustrating for me, to be honest, because as well as New Zealand did in that game, it was almost like a worse preparation because they just didn't, they didn't get a full game and they didn't get mass reps for all the guys that needed them, and then you come into this West Indies game where everyone got their overs, but everyone got pumped, and it was also another weirdly just like unhelpful from my perspective, looking at it from the outside in, trying to figure out some things ahead of the World Cup. Just an unhelpful event, other than those two major factors that you mentioned, which are Kane Williamson and Trent Boult doing great things. And my feeling the last time we chatted Blackcaps was that as just weird and dumb and annoying as some of basically all of the preparation has been for this World Cup from the Blackcaps, as many questions as exist about this team unanswered, my feeling was always that come a World Cup, come like the big games, you just have to rely on your best players to be at their best. And if Kane Williamson doesn't score runs and Trent Boult doesn't take wickets, it doesn't really matter how well our preparation went or how badly it went, because it's going to be the same result. But Kane Williamson is scoring runs, Trent Boult has taken wickets in these warm-up games, so that is reason enough to think that I don't. It's sort of like what I was saying on the last podcast we did about New Zealand football, and I was talking about the football ferns getting thrashed by America, and how just the nature of that game didn't just despite how bad the loss was, it didn't actually change anything in terms of expectations or whatever. And I'm sort of the same here. I think the two players that dominated for New Zealand have given me enough hope to think that everyone else's rubbishness doesn't matter as much, at least no different than what I already expected of them. So I'm going to try to sum up this feeling in an entire word, and I don't know, I'm almost leaning towards saying indifferent, because I think we've been talking a bit about what constitutes a successful World Cup for the Blackcaps. I'm also on board with our polls there on that matter, which is that the semi-finals equals success. But I don't think it's like a zero-sum game here, where if they don't make the semi-finals, then it's automatically a failure. I think a failure is like 7th or 8th. I think if they finish in that 5th or 6th range, it's an adequate, just neutral, moderate performance, which is neither good or bad, neither successful nor unsuccessful, just exactly as expected. And I'm feeling pretty confident that we're going to end up about 5th or 6th, and I don't think anything's changed in the last few days on that matter. Do you disagree? Do you agree? Do you love it? Do you hate it? What do you rate it?
If the Blackcaps are not going to make the semi-finals, this is going to make me sound terrible. I want a calamity. I don't want nothing in New Zealand cricket is going to change if the Blackcaps finish 5th. As you said, that's a nice reflection of where the Blackcaps stand as a ODI team. But as someone who believes there are wider problems in how New Zealand cricket is as a whole, and has repeatedly stated that this World Cup is going to be a pivotal moment for New Zealand cricket, Blackcaps finishing 5th or 6th doesn't really do anything for me. If they're not going to make the semi-finals, I'd just prefer them to have an absolute shocker and real problems be addressed. That's not to say I won't, like, if they finish 5th, that's a good result. You know, you look at it in a bigger picture, they perform well, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of, I think I have a real unique perspective in that and this flows into you as well and how you've covered various Blackcaps things, just being so in the drain of little details from New Zealand cricket, and how the White Ferns are going, how the Blackcaps are going. So being so ingrained in that puts you in a unique position where you can kind of see different dots being connected and different issues coming together. So that's just a long-winded way of me saying that I'm a dick, essentially. But that stems from the fact that the Blackcaps should be competing to at least to the semi-final stage. And if they don't reach the semi-finals, it's because of details that have been missed or skipped over, like the fact that England have been preparing for this World Cup for 4 years. Everything has been directed to this World Cup, and the Black Caps have done the complete opposite. So if you're looking at why the Black Caps don't make the semi-finals, that's when I step in and I say, well, here are a list of events, here are a list of sketchy situations as to why the Black Caps underperformed. And to me, that is important because a lot of Kiwis, I think, are going to just accept that the Black Caps finished 5th or 6th. Like it's, that's okay. Well, no, if everything was taken care of to prepare the Black Caps for success at this World Cup, the Black Caps would have made the semi-finals. The Black Caps probably would have performed far better. So it's I don't know, as you can probably guess, it's a very complex situation for me with this Black Caps and this World Cup. So I'm not sure if you want to respond to any of that.
Yeah, valiant in defeat is a very Kiwi attitude, isn't it? And it's the exact opposite of what, for example, an Australian team would be. Like, if they go into every Cricket World Cup expecting to win it, and if they don't win it, questions get asked. And they tend to, they've won most of the last 20 years of these World Cups because they're just ruthless and efficient and all sort of attributes that I don't think you have in the Black Caps right now. I guess what you're saying is, like, if they lose within those sort of noble realms, it will be just as expected, and it will be just exactly what they've done for the last 2 or 3 years. Like, they'll have a terrible series and people will get upset, and then they'll just have a good one. They'll come home and, like, they'll travel poorly, and then they'll come home and whoop Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, and people will, like, forget about how bad they were doing before and just remember, oh yeah, the Black Caps, they're pretty good. They're all right. They're doing good things. And that's just not an overall reflection of where they've been going, and they haven't been putting, like, I don't need to rehash all this, that they haven't been putting themselves in the best position to succeed, because we've been talking about this for 2 years, like ever since the Champions Trophy debacle, which should have been a major shake-up, and I'm not sure that it was. I also think an idea that I've been thinking more recently, which is slightly off topic here, but I want to throw it out so I don't forget to say it later on, is that Mike Hesson has kind of buggered this up a bit. Like, I know he left for personal reasons, so it's not like he did anything deliberately, but had he left after the Champions Trophy and given Gary Stead a couple years to work on things, I think they'd be in a much more stable position just as a specific Black Caps team than they are right now. I think he sort of threw them under the bus, leaving as close to the World Cup as he did. But yes, I digress. What you're talking about is, I guess, the matter of what am I trying to say? It's not if they lose, it's how they lose, sort of thing. Where if you're gonna be disappointing, if you're gonna come away below expectations, you might as well do it in a useful manner. And you're right, there's a complacency about the Black Caps, and it's not just New Zealand cricket, it's New Zealand cricket fans, it's potentially even some of the players. I don't know, I'm not in that scene to be able to say things, but sometimes I wonder. There just seems to be a little bit of a complacency, whereas if they do good but not good enough, nothing will change. If they do terribly, it'll be a catalyst for people to start asking questions. And you mentioned how well England have prepared for this World Cup, and I don't think it's possible to have prepared better for a World Cup. Whether or not they have success from it, like, that's a different matter. You can only put yourself in the best position. You can't control the actual outcome like that. But England have made a concerted effort over 4 years to really shake things up, to focus on ODI cricket. They've changed things. They've differentiated between their Test and ODI players. They've really specialised in a way that the Black Caps don't do. Like, they've changed structures and how they work with all these coaching things and different aspects. Just many very interesting things, led by a very quite, at the moment, I'd say quite inspiring leader in Owen Morgan. And the funny thing about this is that Owen Morgan has taken it all from Brendan McCullum 4 years ago. He's just trying to, and that's not a coincidence either. He's deliberately trying to follow the model of Brendan McCullum, playing cricket in that positive, no fear manner. The reason England had a big catalyst for change 4 years ago was because Tim Southee ripped them to pieces at Westpac Stadium in the World Cup. That was kind of a turning point for both these countries, because it was New Zealand making a huge statement in a World Cup on the way to making the final, and then later on not continuing to improve from that position, whereas England took that as a major reason for needing change. And now they've got themselves in the position where they're hosting the World Cup this time. They're the ones bringing back that Brendan McCullum attitude. They're the ones who are now favourites to win the World Cup. And it's just kind of funny how those two countries, how those two cricket teams have diverged in that way. And yeah, I don't want the Blackcaps to. I would rather they finish 5th or 6th and don't embarrass themselves, and maybe, I know it's going to keep them on that steady track, but I still think if we can see this from the outside, surely they can see things from the inside and make the changes without needing a dramatic situation to force their hand in that way. But yeah, I don't know. I guess the track record recently suggests that's not going to happen, but I'm happy to just wait and see how we go. I'm happy to sit back and enjoy the ride.
You mentioned complacency, and when I think of complacency, I think, is there a bit of low-key arrogance with this Blackcaps ODI team? Not specifically the players, but just around it, organisers just thinking the Blackcaps can go straight to a World Cup after an IPL, play a couple warm-up games, they're sweet. The Blackcaps can get over all these little minor issues, and it's all going to be it's a bit of that she'll be right attitude that hasn't really been earned. And that I'll segue into the nuts and bolts of some of these Blackcaps conundrums that should have really perhaps probably kind of been sorted out before the World Cup. But here we are. We've just watched the warm-up game where Colin Munro opened the innings against India, and then in the next warm-up game we had Henry Nicholls opening the batting. So we're coming into this World Cup with no idea who our opening combination is. And again, if we're looking at England, everything has been designed to come into this World Cup with details sorted. You can probably take that out further to a lot of the other competing nations. So let's just talk about this opening situation where we have Martin Guptill's definitely going to open. Let me just pull up Martin Guptill's recent innings. He had 5 against West Indies and 22 against India. And he's coming off an IPL where he played a glorious 3 games and didn't score over 40. He hasn't scored over 40 since the 1st of March, where he scored a century for Auckland in a Plunket Shield game. And so that was... So he hasn't passed 40 in his last 7 innings. So that's Martin Guptill, who is the rock. He is the only certainty in that opening combination, let alone the fact that we don't know who's going to be his partner, Henry Nicholls or Colin Munro.
Hold up, are you also saying he's only batted 7 times in the last 2 months?
Correct. So
including IPL games?
He only played 3 IPL games.
Well, that doesn't sound like the best warm-up for a guy who we know is he's a form player. When he's on, and when he's off, he can struggle. I'm not massively liking those omens there, Doc.
Oh, hold the phone here, Wildcard, because guess how many games Colin Munro played in the IPL?
I know he played at least 1 or 2, but I didn't follow the IPL, so for all I know he played 20, but I'm going to guess 6.
He played 4, but the thing,
Ooh.
Colin Munro was playing in I think it's the Pakistani league prior to, so he does have a bit of a history there. But Colin Munro, in his last 10 innings, so you've got a couple of games for Karachi, so 5 games for Karachi and 4 games for the Capitals. I don't even know who they are. Some IPL team, who gives a shit. But
It's an ice hockey team, isn't it?
Yeah, Washington. He's in 10 innings, Colin Munro has a top score of 40. Right, so Martin Guptill, the big guppy, the star of the Blackcaps, hasn't passed 40 in his last 6 innings. Colin Munro, the swashbuckler, the man who's going to help the Blackcaps hit 400. One of the best pinch hitters since Brendan McCullum. Top score of 40 in his last 10 innings in T20 cricket with one warm-up game here. Henry Nicholls, for the point of this exercise, we'll bring up Henry Nicholls if you just bear with me here, wildcard, but Henry Nicholls he's not involved in any T20 cricket, so he doesn't have the history to go with. He only played 1 game against an Australian 11. So Henry Nicholls has played 3 50-over games since the end of the Blackcaps Test summer, 2 of which have been warm-up games, 1 against the Australian 11. He's hit 2 15s and a 0. So that's what our openers are coming into this World Cup with.
Jesus.
And that in itself is terrible, let alone the fact that we don't know who is going to open between Colin Munro and Henry Nicholls. So get your thoughts on the opening situation, wildcard, but keep in mind that there are ramifications elsewhere, because if you bat Henry Nicholls opening, suddenly Jimmy Neesham and all these bowling all-rounders move up a spot. I have zero trust in Colin de Grandhomme and Mitchell Santner leading the Blackcaps to a glorious World Cup with greater batting responsibility. But that's offset by the fact that I'm not really hugely confident that Colin Munro can do a job at the top of the innings. So my feeling is that just go with Colin Munro and bolster that middle order by having Henry Nicholls and Tom Latham or Tom Blundell, depending on Latham's injury situation, because I think you need that solidarity in the middle order to really make a difference at this World Cup. And then that just means we've got to take the good with the bad with Colin Munro up top. So how are you feeling about that? What's your favoured opening combination? And again, keep in mind that whatever happens up the top of the order impacts what's happening in the middle order, which is pretty much how I base my decision with going with Munro.
Yeah, so the last sort of 2 months or whatever, I've been getting pretty annoyed at the fact that not only are the Blackcaps not doing anything sort of in terms of playing games, but specifically I've been annoyed at just the fact that all these dudes are playing 2020 cricket. And there was a lot of chat for a while there about how bad Kane Williamson's form was in the IPL, and I know I think he got a good score towards the end of there, but at that time I didn't care. Like, 2020 cricket is a different sport to ODI cricket. There are different challenges, different tasks, different aspects to it. It's a different beast entirely here. So I just thought it was bad preparation, but I don't think it's in any way reflective of how Kane Williamson was batting or what you can expect from him at the World Cup. So that was just like a dumb way of making headlines from our Kiwi sporting media. But Colin Munro is an exception to the rule because he doesn't need to bat 50 overs in a way that, like, Martin Guptill, for example. Martin Guptill come in and bat, take his time getting through those first 20 overs because he'll cash in on the last 15 or 20 if he's still around. And Munro is not going to do that. If he bats 50 overs, he'll probably score a double century, but he's not going to do that. We don't need him to bat any more than 20 overs at the maximum. His role is to be a pinch hitter at the top. So playing 2020 cricket is fine. The fact that he's not scoring runs in 2020 cricket, not so fine. I have no faith that he will be a successful opener at the World Cup. I would start with Nichols and Guptill, I would roll with those two the entire way through, and I would have been getting both of them reps as openers, specifically Nichols as an opener because he's the one who needs it. Guptill's at least entrenched there. Been getting them both as many reps as possible over the past month or two, but obviously that's not been what's going on. I wonder if they're too worried about these 350 plus scores that everyone's predicting, and are thinking they need to chase that game, and therefore Munro was going to get the gig because there's a possibility that he can score 60 off 30 to start an innings. And let's be honest, he's not going to do that. He's going to miss a straight one and get done for single figures more often than not. That's what he's been doing in New Zealand in ODIs. It's what he's been doing for the last 2 years in ODIs. You can't expect things to magically change at a World Cup where everyone else is peaking. But I don't really know what the solution to that is. I wonder, is it completely out of the question now after Blundell just had a nice innings? Circumstances allowed him to cash in more so than he would have ordinarily, but a decent enough knock. We know Blundell is a better wicketkeeper than Latham. I don't think that's debatable at this point, Latham being a converted keeper anyway. Is there a situation where you might want to slide Latham up to open? I don't think this is what I would like myself, because I just like Latham as a number 5, as that sort of pivot player in the middle order. The guy who links your top order to your all-rounders coming in after him. But I wonder if that might be in the thinking, and if it is, obviously, then it shows that the planning is out of the window. Or maybe, alternatively, a much better idea that I just had spontaneously. So maybe Colin Munro could bat at 6 and be a closer alongside Jimmy Neesham, and that sort of, Neesham at 7, Munro at 6, and then you've got 2 big hitters coming in late in innings. Because a 2020 guy as an opener, you expect to hit 6s from ball 1 anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It's not a whole lot different. He's facing an older ball. He might do even better. I don't know. Are any of these potential solutions?
Oh, they're all potential solutions, but they're all...
Maybe realistic is a word I should have thrown in.
They're all new kind of solutions that we shouldn't really be dealing with this close to the start of the World Cup. Without going too far into the history, we all know the lack of planning and preparation that we've talked about ad nauseum. So at this stage, I'm just like, Colin Munro, bro, you just go bang at the top of the order. And then if it becomes unbearable with how Colin Munro's failing, which is a very viable option considering Munro has not scored over 40 in his last 10 innings of cricket, then you make a change. I think Colin Munro is going to start and be given first opportunity. Again, I think you need Latham in the middle order. I think you need to
so do I.
Hold things together, because there is very little evidence to suggest that Colin de Grandhomme, for example, is a consistent big hitter down the order. I think a lot of teams are going to be confident with how they can bowl to some of these non-big names, these role players. A lot of teams are going to be confident that if Colin Munro is batting at the top of the order, they can do what the best teams have pretty much always done against Colin Munro, just tie him up and he'll hit himself out. Teams are going to have plans to Henry Nicholls. Teams are going to have plans to Tom Latham, Colin de Grandhomme, Mitchell Santner, and how they go about scoring runs. And you did mention the fascination with scores over 300, which moves us into the bowling department, unless you got more stuff you want to talk about with the batting. But the best way and most overlooked way to stop teams to deal with this whole plethora of runs that are going to come in is to take wickets, and take lots of wickets, and be a really good bowling team, and restrict teams under pressure to 250, 200. That's where a lot of my focus is going to be, and I think it's just so volatile with how this Blackcaps team could perform at the World Cup, because Trent Boult could be a really amazing World Cup bowler, and this could be like another World Cup for Trent Boult to step up and establish himself as one of the biggest clutch performers New Zealand sports ever had. That type of thing. Like there's a... Same goes for Ross Taylor, same goes for Guptill, same goes for Williamson. It's there for Colin Munro if he wants it. It's there for Henry Nicholls. These guys have an opportunity to rise to a new level and be, slide into that kind of Grant Elliott category. Like that's what's available to them. Kane Williamson, Ross Taylor, Trent Boult, they're already above the Grant Elliott category, but, there's different levels for these individuals to go to on a performing at a World Cup level kind of thing, if you're following me here. So who from the bowling department is going to do that? Like, that's what I'm most interested in now, and it's probably best to start with Timothy Southee, who only played one of these world warm-up games. He only played against India. He wasn't in the team against West Indies. He didn't bowl against West Indies, and you've done a lot more statistical work about Tim Southee's form. So we don't even know if Tim Southee is going to be in the bowling attack. So again, we don't know our opening combination and we don't know our best bowling attack. Let alone the fact that we don't know how Tim Southee is going to perform, because there's a high possibility that Tim Southee just operates at classic Tim Southee levels, swinging the ball around. Like maybe every game that Tim Southee plays, he wakes up, there's overcast conditions. Suddenly the ball's swinging. Everything's in favour of Tim Southee, and he's a weapon. But there's also a lot of evidence to suggest that Tim Southee, A, shouldn't be in the team, and B, isn't going to perform. So how are you viewing the Tim Southee situation? Which again, this uncertainty then impacts the wider bowling attack, because are you going to play Matt Henry? Are you going to play Lockie Ferguson? How do you wrap your head around that situation, Wildcard?
Two major thoughts on Tim Southee here, because you're right, looking back at the numbers over the last, basically since he got, 7 for against England at the last World Cup, he went through about 3.5 years where he was averaging damn near 50 in ODI cricket with the ball. Like, that's just, if he didn't have the track record, and I know you can't eliminate the track record because he did those things, those are part of his experience, part of his story. But if he didn't have that in his bag, he would be nowhere near this World Cup team. However, he did have a little bit of a resurgent summer in the white ball stuff recently, so I think he did enough to lock down a starting gig, and he did enough for a couple reasons. One is because, although I don't trust him as a death bowler, he does have the ability to bowl a decent Yorker, so he's the best of a bad bunch in that situation. And maybe death bowling won't be as dramatic as it has been, certainly in the last World Cup, maybe the one before that, because I think you're just going to see people hitting from the start, as opposed to just keeping wickets in hand. Obviously, you're going to be a team. Like Australia are always going to be a team who prioritises those last 15 overs. I think you've seen, though, with England, West Indies, I wonder if Pakistan might end up being a little bit more like this as well. They could go either way. But like teams who, even India as well, like teams who, they're not going to wait till the last 15 overs to go. They're just going to see a bad ball and put it over the fence. And you've got tiny little boundaries here, which is something that I'm very worried about when it comes to our spinning situation. We might have time to get to that as well afterwards. But yeah, I think Tim Southee is going to be the opening partner with Trent Boult, partly just because they have a good combination going back many years, partly because he's got good experience, and partly because this is the other reason with Tim Southee, is that we saw what happens when he doesn't open against the West Indies. Matt Henry bowled 9 overs and went for triple figures. And that can't happen. Like, you're not going to win a game when you've got a bowler going for 11 and over or something like that off 9. Like, you just can't do that. You can't get away with that. I just don't see a better alternative than Tim Southee, and I trust him enough to think that there's, like you said, if things go right for him, the ball might swing. Trent Boult's been getting a little bit of movement in the air in these 2 games. That's enough encouragement for me. Did you see why Tim Southee didn't play against West Indies though?
No, enlighten me. I thought it was just a missing the game.
it was missing his teeth. He had his wisdom teeth taken out, which, I mean, this is just I haven't heard from the horse's mouth, so to speak, but this is what they were saying on the commentary anyway last night. I think Simon Dool said it or whatever. So now I've had my share of dental fees over the years. I got a text from the dentist a couple weeks ago telling me to book in my next checkup or whatever, which I haven't done yet, but whatever. And I remember a couple years ago I got told, like, you might want to get your wisdom teeth out at some point. Now, I still haven't had them out, but I can't imagine a situation where it gets to the point where they get so bad that I have to have them out within a week of a Cricket World Cup starting. A Cricket World Cup that I was expecting to play in. Like, unless something drastic happened there, and of course it could have, that seems like... it's difficult because it's a personal situation, but I'm almost tempted to throw this in the weird planning category as well. Why is Tim Southee having his wisdom teeth taken out this close to the World Cup? Why didn't he do it in, like, 2 months ago, back in New Zealand? Why didn't he do it then? Like, it just seems weird to me. It just seems really weird to me, you know?
That's the thing that's...
it's so black cap, so isn't it?
A very, very black cappy. I think we might have to make that a thing, like, oh, mate, you're acting a bit black cappy. Like, just sort your shit out. Like, get your ducks in order, you know? You don't need to be so black cappy.
Colin Monroe's got his ducks in order. Cheeky cricket jab.
Far out. That is just a shot across the bow of Colin Monroe. Wildcard coming in hot there. So you did mention the spin situation. I'll just talk you through the stats from these two warm-up games. Wildcard. Mitchell Santner and Ish Sodhi both bowled 3 overs against India. 3 overs apiece. Obviously, they're trying to hide their spinning wizards against the Indians, aren't they? They both conceded...
Plus, Trent Bolt took a bunch of wickets at the top, and they didn't need them.
Yeah, that's true. They both roughly had 6 runs and over off their 3 overs each. So fairly even standards there. Against West Indies, Ish Sodhi 5 overs at 8.6 runs per over, no wicket. Mitchell Santner a lot more overs, 9 overs at 7.88. My belief is that in keeping with this whole stopping teams scoring 300, you're going to need Ish Sodhi. You're going to need Ish Sodhi to take wickets, but I'm fairly confident Ish Sodhi is going to have limited game time just because they're going to go with Mitchell Santner and the apparent all-round strength. However, Ish Sodhi, what have I told you about his batting before wildcard?
Nothing I didn't already know. The dude can swing the willow.
The dude, if you're batting Ish Sodhi at 9, 10 or 11, he is a good batsman because his job is to come in and hit boundaries. He hit 39 at a strike rate of 243 against West Indies. That is Ish Sodhi. That's what Ish Sodhi offers. Down there, it's not about who is the best batsman. No, it's what job are you doing. You're coming in to whack runs. Ish Sodhi can do that. So I think it's incredibly rough on Ish Sodhi to not select him on his batting when you just bat him down the order where he can do a simple job of hitting boundaries. But I think to take the wickets you are going to need, you need X Factor, you need Ish Sodhi, instead of having Neesham, de Grandhomme, Henry and Ferguson all in the same team, or Southee add that in. Like, they are all fairly similar bowlers, and that's a bowling attack. A bowling attack of Neesham, de Grandhomme, Santner, Henry, Ferguson, Southee and or Bolts. No, not and or Bolts definitely there, but basically a mundane, tame bowling attack is a recipe for 300 runs wildcard. So how are you? What's your feelings on the spin attack and the spin department and the makeup of the Blackcaps bowling attack as a whole?
Right, well, first of all, I'm going to make a bold prediction, and that's that Colin de Grandhomme won't play more than 2 games at this World Cup. I don't see how I just think Jimmy Neesham has overtaken him in that role, and Jimmy Neesham has... I don't trust his bowling, but as long as he can chip in with a wicket or two, just be a partnership breaker, be a little bit of a Nathan Astle, I'm perfectly fine with that. And personally, I would pick 5 bowlers plus Jimmy Neesham. And to do that, I think there's three guys that are locked in, which is Bolt, without a doubt. I think Southee, just because he sort of has to be compared to the other options. And then I reckon Ferguson, on the basis of his last year of international cricket, I reckon Ferguson is in there too. I would pick both spinners. I don't think that Kane Williamson and Gary Stead will pick both spinners. I think they will probably pick Mitchell Santner, and ordinarily that would quite upset me, but I think just on the basis of what they're dealing with in England here, I watched up until I think both of them had bowled about 5 overs against West Indies, what I'd seen, and Southee came on first, and he bowled a couple nice looking deliveries, trying to work his wrong and in from early on, and then after a couple nice deliveries, he started getting pummeled to the boundary. And the thing is with him is he can get wickets. We've seen him as a 2020, extraordinaire at times. He can spin the ball both ways, so if you hit the ball, he's in the game. If you don't pick the spin, he's in the game. It's just that in England, some of these boundaries are going to be really tiny, and those mishits are going to fly for 6 anyway, and I'm worried about that. I'm worried about how that's going to go for him. I think he's going to take wickets, but he's also going to be quite costly. Whereas Mitchell Santner came on in that game after Southee had already bowled a few overs, after Southee had started to get pumped a little bit, and Santner really tied down an end. He looked real sharp, and he got a wicket caught on the boundary. He was mixing up his paces. It was looking good. It's the best I've seen him bowl since he got injured, because I thought he was a little bit rubbish in some of the stuff I've seen him in over the summer. But then I went to bed and woke up the next morning and saw he still went for 70. So obviously he got smashed towards the end as well. So I'm not really sure there's an easy solution to this. But yeah, I think they're probably going to lean towards Santner, but leave it up to me and I'd be picking both of them. Because I like that option. I like that option of the attacking guy and the guy who can tie up an end. And bowling in tandem, I think Santner would do a lot of good for Southee by constricting the run rate at his end, And I think Southee does great work for Santner by taking the odd wicket and letting Santner bowl to new batsmen who are going to be more cautious. So I think that'd work great. I don't think that's what we're going to get to see, though.
It's going to be very interesting to view Southee because a lot of other teams are coming in with hot leggies as well. So you got Adil Rashid, Adam Zampa, Imran Tahir, Rashid Khan. There's a lot of leggies of good quality at this World Cup, and if all these other leggies are starting for other teams and performing well, the difference, I don't think you can say the difference is the quality between the leggies. It's a matter of opportunity. And a lot of the other leggies, like Adil Rashid, has been given 4 years to make an impact and fine-tune his craft at the ODI level for this World Cup, because Owen Morgan knows that he's a strike bowler. Southee has had, again, different, immense difference between England and Aotearoa here. Southee's had the opposite. He's been in and out of the team. Hasn't been given consistent game time, but Southee, I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago. Southee is one of the most experienced white ball bowlers from New Zealand in England. So Southee's played a lot of T20 cricket in England. That's all very familiar to him. And you're going to have a similar, I don't like to, you said this before as well, drawing comparisons between 2020 cricket and ODI cricket is very difficult, but for someone like Southee, in both formats, he's going to come up against batsmen who are eager to attack him. So that's a somewhat unique scenario given the ODI landscape now. We're chasing 300 runs, so teams are going to be a lot more aggressive batting. And it's also experience in the same conditions. So comparing IPL to World Cup's difficult, but comparing T20 cricket for a leggy in both formats in the same country, batsmen are trying to attack you. It's a very interesting little situation. Again, considering Southee is one of the most experienced white ball bowlers from New Zealand in England. And against the best teams, I can't see Mitchell Santner conceding less than 5 runs and over. He's just going to be someone that other teams are going to work over. I don't think Mitchell Santner is good enough to be one of these bowlers where it's like, oh, we'll just knock him around. We won't lose a wicket to him. We'll just knock him around for ones and twos. I think
Daniel Vittori.
I think other teams are more scared of Ish Sodhi than they are Mitchell Santner, which is another way of chopping it. Do you want to just, we'll slide in. We're going hard with this Cricket World Cup preview because I think this is a good format for us to work through. Like, I find it so difficult, and that's why I've written about it in a few different ways with different angles and trying to find the right words to use, writing about the Black Caps and like setting the scene for what a big moment this is for New Zealand cricket. It got a bit frustrating, so it's I'm enjoying the being able to talk about it because we together I think we can really set the scene for Kiwi fans with this just greater World Cup situation, because the mainstream media don't want to talk about this because they don't want to be critical because they're all after the scoops, which we saw in the naming of the World Cup squad. Everyone was hunting for be the first one to be offer the breaking news. Tom Blundell's in, oh my God, and they were all very proud of their scoops. You only get scoops and breaking news by having good relationships with New Zealand cricket. So you got the mainstream media who are basically New Zealand cricket's mouthpiece. They are very cozy with the mainstream media. But then you look around, I've absorbed a lot of pre-World Cup content, and everyone's talking up New Zealand because they don't actually know what New Zealand and the Black Caps have been up to. They just kind of, Kane Williamson, he's amazing. Trent Boult, he's amazing. But you don't know like how the team's preparation's been. You don't know what Tim Southee's been up to for the last 12 months and so on and so forth. So I think we're in a really good position where we are very educated and very excited about the World Cup. They play Sri Lanka on Saturday, and it's a good start for the Black Caps. You got Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and then Afghanistan before you play India. So we'll split it. I'll run through all the games, but I think it's best to split it into talking about those first 3 games that the Black Caps need to target. So you got Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Afghanistan in the space of roughly a week. And then they come out against India, South Africa, West Indies, Pakistan, Australia, England. So I think we can safely say that the first 3 games are games the Black Caps should win and need to win. That's a pretty easy start to the World Cup for the Black Caps wildcard.
Yes, but you know the old standard when you're playing cards is that if you've got a good hand, if you've got a crap hand, then someone else must have a pretty good one. So if you've got a nice and easy road into the World Cup, then the rest of the games are going to be pretty ruthless. And I think that here's my prediction is that we're going to be in with the shot of making the semi-finals after 7 games, and then we're going to lose to England and Australia back to back, and that's gonna kill it off. Just looking at that schedule, those first 3 games, dead right, those are must wins. They're not going to make the semis if they don't win all 3 of those games and get off to a good start. But they're also the kind of games where you do get a little bit of an ease into the World Cup. So I almost wonder, with some of the, at times, almost a little bit farcical in these 2 warm-up games, all these questions still left on the table about this team. I almost wonder, maybe it's not deliberate, but I almost wonder if maybe it's for the best. If we're not going to answer all the questions in these games, we might as well just answer none of them and come in as a complete mystery. And I've been listening to some of the same podcasts as you, reading some of the same articles, and New Zealand are getting dark horse candidacy from overseas. A lot of people, a lot of cricket writers and ex-players and stuff, seem to really rate what the Black Caps are up to, and I can only come to the same conclusion as you, which is that they haven't been playing close enough attention, and the Black Caps even haven't been playing that many games, so what have they even got to go on? But Yeah, it's an interesting place to be because I don't think it's one that the Black Caps would shy away from. I think they quite like being unknown and underrated, and I mean, they're probably a little bit overrated by some of these people, but they're overrated for the wrong reasons. They're overrated for reasons that aren't going to affect how other teams play against them because they know who Kane Williamson is, they know who Trent Bolt is, so there's just nothing changes there. But they don't know who's going to be opening, they don't know who's batting 5 and 6 and 7, and they don't know what bowling attack's going to come out here, and even some of the players who are going to be playing, a lot of teams won't know much about Lockie Ferguson other than, it's one thing to scout a guy and watch the video, it's another thing to have played against him, especially a fast bowler. And Colin Munro even is a little bit of a mystery, certainly Henry Nicholls if he's opening. Like, there's a few different wrinkles that other teams won't be expecting from the Black Caps. So I wonder if sliding under the radar isn't in their benefit almost.
The old mystery tactic. I like it. A little bit of mystery for the Black Caps. I like it if it's deliberate, that's for sure. If the Black Caps lose one of these games, it's going to put them in a very niggly situation moving forward to the crux of the tournament, especially with how competitive it is, because I think it goes straight to semi-finals, so that's top 4 out of 10 teams. So you're going to have England, Australia, South Africa, West Indies. No, not West Indies at this stage. India, England, South Africa, Australia. That's 4 teams there. Then you've got West Indies who could do something, and you've got Pakistan who could do something. So there's going to be 6 teams competing for the top 4, viable, really competing for it, depending on if the West Indies are hot, depending on if Pakistan are hot. My underdog dark horse is actually South Africa because they're pretty good at cricket. And if the Black Caps can get 3 wins under their belt to start the tournament, that's going to put them in a real strong position coming into the India game. And you've got all 4... You're playing, your first 4 games are against 4 subcontinent teams, so that could be beneficial. Not quite as important as the results, so getting the wins. I think at this stage you just want 3 wins from these first 3 games. However the fuck they come, whoever performs, whatever, who cares? Get 3 wins and let's get rolling. But below that you've got a Colin Munro situation, whereas if you start the tournament with Colin Munro, you need a performance in those first 3 games, or else then you're going to start to look at Henry Nicholls opening and other stuff like that. So it gives them a nice little buffer to see who's warming up, because I don't think a lot of teams are going to keep their same playing 11 throughout the World Cup. You're going to have different players maybe coming in and out, because it's a long World Cup. Not long, relatively speaking, to other World Cups, but the fact that you're just playing against every nation means that you're going to have different players standing up and falling out of form, falling in form. So how that plays out for the Black Caps and how their playing 11 changes over these first 3 games, let alone the whole World Cup, is going to be an interesting little wrinkle to pay attention to.
Yeah, you look at it, everyone plays 9 games, right? And so top 4 teams make the semi-finals, 6 teams miss out, 4 teams make the semis. I don't think any of these teams are going to do what, say, Australia or India might have been threatening to do in the past and just, win all 9 games. So I think first is probably going to have 8, maybe even only 7 wins. So I think it'll be tight at the top for sure. So it might be a situation where, I don't know how they split it, if it's net run rate or head-to-heads or whatever, might come in, will certainly come into calculation at least. I reckon 6 wins is probably going to get you in the semi-finals as long as you don't get thrashed in any of these other games. So let's say the Black Caps win those first 3 games, then they're in a situation where they just have to go 50-50 in the remaining 6. And can they win 3 games against West Indies, Pakistan, South Africa, Australia, India, England? I mean, if they do, then they'll make the semi-finals. So, and if they don't, then they don't deserve to. So it's not really a prediction game at this point. It's just the state of the team and how this World Cup works. But at the same time, what's so fascinating, and the more I've looked at it from a Black Caps point of view, the more I've just had that indifferent feeling where, I think we're just going to finish fifth or sixth and be sort of not mediocre, because mediocre sounds bad, but just like average, just acceptable but not good, just in that sort of C range, a C plus. We passed, but we didn't do anything interesting here. So that's affected the way I've looked at the World Cup, but just in more recent times, as a wider picture, I guess the word is content has become available. I've looked at it more from these other teams' perspectives, and it really is such a fascinating World Cup, and I'm getting pretty excited about just the stuff beyond New Zealand, because those first three teams that we play, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, I think there's a 0% chance that those three teams don't all at least win one game against another team outside of that trio. Everyone can beat everyone at some point, and so you really do have to be on every game. It's such a high level of consistency that's going to be expected, because a bad day at the office, like the Blackcaps had in that first innings against West Indies, only a warm-up game, doesn't count, whatever. A game like that, and that could be the difference between ruining your whole World Cup. So you've got it's just such a well-poised tournament, because the very best teams aren't so far ahead of everyone else that they're not vulnerable, and the very worst teams aren't so far behind anyone else that they're all vulnerable. And you've got three teams in the middle there in New Zealand, Pakistan, and West Indies who could be amazing or terrible. And it's really hard to predict at this point where any of them are going to go.
And that's a lovely place to wrap it up, because I've just got a Peter Boren tweet here, who is the former captain of Netherlands cricket, obviously from Aotearoa as well. He says, referring to the photo of all the Cricket World Cup captains sitting on the couch, he said this would be a better photo if all these other captains, he lists all the captains' names, were on it from the smaller nations. And I feel that. I feel that the World Cup should be a bigger, better thing, but I'm also really excited for this World Cup. Like you, I just want to see this concentrated best teams in the world going at each other to see who is the best ODI cricket team. It's such an important gauge for who is the best. I'm watching this replay of the West Indies against the Blackcaps, and if you said to me 18 months ago the West Indies are going to roll out a really fun and exciting ODI team for the World Cup, and of all the dark horse potentials, West Indies is most exciting, and the West Indies team could be that, I'll be like, well, what are you up to? West Indies are in a shambolic state at the moment. And yet the West Indies are here ready to do something pretty legit at this World Cup. So I'm very excited. I'm eager to see all these fantastic cricket teams play cricket at a high level, put cricket on the map, and obviously very interested to see how the Blackcaps fit into that situation. Wildcard. And I think we might have to wrap it up there. Do you have any closing words for us?
It's pretty long podcast there. Well, I reckon we should just finish up by pointing out how our podcasting schedule over the next month and a half, because we're definitely going to be going pretty hard on the Cricket World Cup, aren't we?
Yeah, we'll do a podcast at least after every Blackcaps game. There might be shorter, sharper conversations about just the Cricket World Cup in general. So we'll bank on being here after every Blackcaps game for sure, and then keep a close eye on what else appears, because it's exciting times for cricket. Yeah, really exciting. So happy. And we'll finish there, Wildcard. I just had to let that excitement simmer in my loins as I watch Andre Russell just absolutely fucking smash it to all parts of wherever they're playing in England. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up there. Wrap it up, and see you. I'll be back to do a rugby league podcast tomorrow. And then we'll be back after the Blackcaps play Sri Lanka I believe that's Saturday morning New Zealand time. So maybe a little Saturday morning podcast for your little cricket lovers around Aotearoa and the world. See you later, alligator.